Welcome, everyone. All right. So we're happy to have everyone here joining us in our monthly ESWN event. And this event is very different because today we're going to talk about predatory journals. Some of you indicated in the registration that you've never heard the term, and others mentioned that you had some experience or heard the term before. So we are very fortunate to have a STEP group, which I'll introduce them to you in a few more seconds. This is an NSF funded project, and they're going to talk to us about this project. And I'm saying I'm part of this program, so it's kind of weird for me to say that in a different way. But today, we really want to talk about what we're going to have today. So we're going to start with this short introduction, and then I'm going to hand it over to the STEP PI project, who's going to tell us about the project. We have laid a very interesting activity for you to sort of identify predatory journals. And we're going to wrap the activity that will take place in breakout room in the main room and talk about your findings. We will have time for discussion, of course, Q&A at the end of the event, and we'll close the event. We'll try to be right at the hour so we can make sure we're staying in time. The event is recorded, and the recording will be available on our YouTube website, but the breakout room will not be recorded. The event is fully captioned, and you are requested to be muted unless you want to ask a question at a time, but also feel free to use the chat as much as possible. I'm going to change my name in a few more minutes to question@ESWN, and feel free to send me any question. You're more than welcome to use the chat, but if you want to stay anonymous with your question, feel free to send them to me or to Remat. One of us will change our name to question@ESWN, and we will make sure to ask your question, but also keep your anonymity. If you have any technical issue, again, contact us, question@ESWN, we'll be there. Right before we start, we want to remind everyone about our code of conduct, and this information, oops, sorry, you can see here. I'm going to put that information also in the chat to make sure that you're all aware of our conduct information, and we really want to try to have a respectful event when everyone respect each other. So I'm going to put that information in a few more seconds in the chat. So if this is your first ever ESWN event, we welcome you, of course. We're very happy to have you here. And we want to remind you that ESWN is a nonprofit organization that dedicated to increase diversity across the geoscience with an emphasis on creating, supporting, and nurturing community. We really are working for culture change to eliminate any barrier and increase our diversity in the scientific workforce, and obviously empower science through professional development. And this is one of our events to do that. All right. And if you are not familiar with the board or with our website, please visit our website so you get to know the people. We're welcome. Any question that you have, reach out to us. Feel free to use. We have different platforms that we can communicate with each other. But these are the board of director and the associate board of director. And I'm very happy and honored to be together with Rima. We are both member event chairs. So we're bringing you some of the event that you have here every year, every month, and we're hoping that we'll get to see you more. So with that, I'm very honored to introduce today the STEP, which is Standard STEM Training in Ethic of Publication Practice. And we have almost full board with us today. And I'm gonna let Professor Amy Cobert, who's the PI of the project, to tell you about the project. And as I said, I'm honored to be part of this project. And I can just quickly say that my role is for mainly early career in the STEM Compact. So I'll give the stage to Amy. Amy, you can share your slide and tell us. about STEP.
All right. So like Karine was saying, STEM Training in Ethics of Publication Practices is a research and training program designed to prepare STEM scholars and other stakeholders to navigate the academic publishing terrain, which, as our project continues to show us, is a terrain that is just becoming more and more complicated every day. So, and one of these complicating factors, which was the initial thing that made us interested in made us pursue this grant, is this complex array of practices that have come to be known as predatory publishing. I am Dr. Amy Kerber, like Karine said. I'm the project PI, but we have a terrific team, and there's no way that this project would have made it this far without our team. And everyone is here today except Dr. Leo Echo, who regretfully could not join us because he is on an international flight to Paris to attend a conference. So if you have to have an excuse, I guess that's a pretty good one. So anyway, one of my most important messages today is going to be that it is nearly impossible to define predatory publishing. Nonetheless, we all have to have definitions, at least for a starting place. And so this is one that has come to be really widely used. It was developed by a working group that met in Ottawa in 2019, and they've simply come to be known as the Ottawa Working Group. And this is their consensus definition, which was published in the journal Nature, I believe, shortly after they developed it. So I think that's why it's had so much prominence and so much visibility. And you'll see it's a pretty useful starting place for the definition, even though I think by the end of today, you're going to see that definition of this term is complex. It's a fraught issue. But anyway, here's their definition as a starting place. Predatory journals and publishers are entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship and are characterized by false or misleading information, deviation from best editorial and publication practices, a lack of transparency, and/or the use of aggressive and indiscriminate solicitation practices. So just briefly, that's a sort of a launching pad for our project. Just briefly, our project has two phases. The research phase is largely complete, and then we're in the training phase, which I'll cover in a minute. But just to give you a summary, really in our research phase, we had two important discoveries. One is a hesitation about the term. I forgot to do this, but normally when I say predatory publishing, I literally use scare quotes, that this definition or this concept is just much more complex than a simple label implies. And in fact, one of my kind of key takeaway messages is I think the very use of a term like predatory is just an effort to make something simple that is inherently very complex. And that's something we all have to do to survive, right? We try to be able to have these terms that kind of separate out the good and the bad, or make an easy distinction between the good and the bad. And so that's why a term like predatory has its attraction, and it is really desirable, and people like to use that term. But the problem is once you dig down in it, it's just a lot more complicated than that term implies. And I put a link here, this article that's highlighted in purple down here, a qualitative content analysis of watchlist versus safe list. How do they address the issue of predatory publishing? I put a link there. I think I'm not going to open it up because I don't want to sidetrack us too much, but I will make these slides available after. I'll share them with anyone who wants them, so you can link to that article if you want to. That article is basically where we reported our very early part of our research, where one of the first things we did is a survey or content analysis of all these lists. And sort of an interesting evolution even during this project, when we first started doing this research, the common terminology was blacklist and whitelist. So you had people, Jeffrey Bill is the famous one that started his blacklist in the early 2000s. And the idea was to list all the journals that you should avoid. So list all the problematic journals. Well, that turned out to cause all sorts of issues, and it was just impossible for anyone to agree, basically. And then, journal editors would get mad, or publishers would get mad, because their publication would end up on this blacklist. So people moved towards what was called the whitelist approach, and that's where you try to identify all the good journals, all the ones that are not problematic. Well, during the course of doing that research, in the first year while we were doing that research, there was a movement in the publishing community and the information science community to get away from that language of blacklist versus whitelist because of the racial connotations. And so we settled on the preferred terminology of watch list versus safe list, with watch lists being the ones that list the bad journals and safe lists being the ones that list the good journals. But anyway, in that article, we kind of begin to make the first part of our argument that really this topic is much more complex than something that can be solved with a simple list approach. And anytime you start trying to make a list, you're going to run into a lot of problems. And so then our second important finding, which kind of just caused us to change course in how we think about the training side of our program, is we really went into this thinking that we were creating something new and that we were going to create this fantastic online training program that was going to be the first thing ever developed. And then we found out fairly early on that actually there were a lot of online training materials already available. So we had to have a lot of difficult conversations and productive conversations about what can we do that is different. And I'll tell you where I ended up in a minute. But I wanted to sidetrack here for a minute, because when I was reading through the questions that people submitted as they were registering for this event, there were a lot of questions about the publisher company called MDPI, which stands for Multidisciplinary Digital Publishing Institute. And honestly, this is one of the journals or one of the publishers we've talked about a lot among our group. And in fact, just this morning, I got an invitation to review for an MDPI journal, which I get those quite a bit, or sometimes I get invited to edit a guest special issue. But the one that caught my attention this morning, the reason it caught my attention is because it was for a journal way outside my field. It's like a journal of applied science, but they were having me, it was tangentially sort of related to a topic I've written about, but it was like this really intense computer science stuff. And I have a PhD in rhetoric. I have no business reviewing an article in computer science. So in any case, I added this slide because I think MDPI makes an interesting case study, and I'm going to end up writing about it in the book. But just a few sort of details that make MDPI an interesting case study. So it was added to Bill's list in 2014, but they appealed and got it removed in 2015. And Bill's list was just fraught with controversy over this kind of stuff. And I linked to this blog post, which again, I can share my slides and you can link to it yourself, that's cited as Crosetto 2021. He really takes a pretty favorable stance towards MDPI, and his blog post is titled something like MDPI, is it predatory, is it not? He takes a really favorable stance towards it, and he says maybe their tactics are better characterized as aggressive rent extracting rather than predatory. And basically what he argues is that, you might love them or you might hate them, but you cannot argue that they have been successful. And their statistics that I've summarized here are astounding. So they went from publishing 36,000 articles in 2017 to 167,000 articles in 2020. And in 2019, they overtook Springer to become the largest publisher of open access journals. And some sources predict that they will overtake Taylor and Francis and become the fourth largest publisher in the world pretty soon. And then the other thing you cannot argue with is, they've got so many journals, but as of 2021, 74 of their journals had impact factors, with 18 of these above 4. And the publisher claims that they had a 57% rejection rate. And like I said, it's a real love-hate. You can find stories all over the internet of people that just love them because of their fast turnaround time, and other people that hate them and say, oh, they're spamming me, they're predatory, whatever. But the most interesting thing I find about MDPI is, again, you might love them or you might hate them, but take a look at some other major publishers, Springer, Sage, just to name a couple. They are adopting their same tactics. They're going for publishing in bulk. They're going for, fast turnaround times, open access, open processes. And so anyway, this is one of the examples that makes this such a complex issue. I don't have a simple answer. Is MDPI predatory or is it not? And so that leads us to kind of where we're at right now. I had said earlier in the presentation that we gave up on the idea of an online training program, partly because there were already so many available, but also because we realized that, our grant has a shelf life. Our grant funding actually ends at the end of this year. And if you publish a website, you're going to need resources to maintain that website. Otherwise, it's just going to be a dead website. And so we decided to shift gears and publish an open access book instead. And the title of the book is The Predatory Paradox, Ethics, Politics, and Practices in Contemporary Scholarly Publishing. And with the MDPI example, I tried to give you an insight or a little example of why paradox is the appropriate term to capture where we're at with this. But anyway, it'll be an open access book. We're trying to make it, the most comprehensive resource available, and we're trying to make it very audience focused with some interactive content, trying to really push the boundaries of what it means to publish a book. So that's all I've got.